For me, it's really important that we are using this very moment in time to, again, understand what our humanity is. Let's pay attention to our humanity. It will help in all of the instances that we're talking about, whether it is about increasing our diversity numbers in all of these industries, or empowering women in a way that we need to continue moving forward. It's shameful that we're still talking about this today. And so for me, it's about humanity. What happened to the empathy? What happened to our connection with other people? We're in a very dangerous cultural and political time. And it's up to us, really, to make sure that we don't fall in that we are connected to human beings because of this emotional state that we're in.
What's a story that you're hoping to tell out of Uber as you look ahead? What's the one element of that humanity that you're hoping to get across?
Well, I mean, like I said, I love people, and I'm very curious about our world and innovation and the future. And so for me, it's about telling all of those pieces of that particular story. What is happening in innovation? How are the products that are being created or the platforms that are being created helping our communities and cities and us? How are we connecting with people who are aspiring? That if there are drivers or riders who are aspiring on this journey, how are we telling that story? How are we communicating that? And quite frankly, also the people who are working at Uber. That's probably the thing that I wake up and think about every day. How are the 17,000 people who work at Uber being celebrated for their work? And for the innovation that's being created. So to me, it's not about competition, really. There is no competition, actually.
Some would beg to differ. But the thing is that there are different identities of these brands. I mean, this is really what you're hitting at here, is that when you look at some of the smaller companies that are trying to break in, and then you look at a Lyft, and then you look at an Uber, at least the way I look at it as a journalist is they're fundamentally different kinds of companies.
Yeah.
Do you feel that Uber is projecting the brand that you want it to be projecting? Do you think that Uber is back at a 10?
That's a really interesting question. The thing is that brands are like people, in that you're right, there are different personalities, and there's also evolution. And that we can't forget those things when you're developing a brand or telling a story about what is happening. It's like telling the story of you. It's like, who did you encounter today that changed you fundamentally?
Both.
Did you make a, oh well, thank you, girl. I appreciate that. But did you make a mistake that you have learned from? Will you repeat it or will you not? There are all these things that happen as a brand that write its own story. And so quite frankly, all I'm doing is trying to communicate all of those things. So there are mistakes, certainly. They should be corrected, and then we should tell that story. There are great innovations that are happening. We should tell those stories. There are great people who work within the brand. We should tell those stories. So I think it's really a complex matter about layering in all of the different aspects of the brand of Uber and then telling that complete story so that it's not one-sided.
What's the story of the individual, the woman who works at Uber right now? There's obviously not one story, there's thousands of stories. But when you think about how the company's perception is changing over time, and hopefully for Uber it's for the better, what is it like being a woman working at Uber right now?
Well, I'm a woman, so I can give that perspective. No, I think it's great. I mean, I really do. I mean, I wouldn't be working there if I didn't think it was great. There's really this, again, I feel like we're in a really serious and complicated moment where we have to take the power to change the industries and the communities and the environments we're in for the better. And by the way, it's not just up to women. We need men to do that too. Like, everybody's culpable. So this is not just a women's story. Because when I'm looking at, the culture within Uber, I'm also asking, what is it like to be a man at Uber?
Yeah, it's a very fair question.
Because you want to make sure that the environment is conducive to positivity. for people to be their best selves when they come to work. That if we're not doing that, then we're not able to really get the best out of all of us. And to me, there is no separation really between like work and home and personal and professional. Like, I'm one human being, and I need to be great in every environment that I'm in. And so I want to be great when I'm at the office. And if there's no environment that I'm feeling is conducive to my greatness, then I need to change that shit.
Yeah.
That's it.
Make a change.
Yes.
There's creativity. It seems like it's something that a lot of people in here I know today are really interested in hearing about, is the creative process behind branding at a big company. Where do some of the best ideas for Uber's current brand, what it will look like in the future, where do you start? Where is the genesis of that process? When you think about winning a new customer over, how do you win with the brand?
Well, I mean, there's innovation, clearly. That
the product itself.
The product itself has to be exceptional, right? You have to start with all of the features and the conveniences and the excitement in the future. So it starts there. But I have to come back to people, that for me, it's like, I want to start with what is happening with the people who are inside, of the vehicle, who are experiencing Uber. It's like, what are you getting out of that moment? It's like, where are you going in your journey? It's like, you could be going to a grocery store, or you could be going to a job interview, or you could be going to meet the love of your life, or you could be going to
take some guy to Iggy Pop, take your driver to Iggy Pop.
You know what I'm saying? It could be some magic like that.
Yeah.
There's so many different things, and so how do we continue to inspire people, to be able to interact in this environment that is gonna, again, make them greater?
Do you find specific stories help you when you hear from riders and drivers?
Oh yeah, for sure.
And do you ever get inspiration from challenges? How much do you draw from moments of weakness where someone does have a bad experience, or there is a safety issue, or there is a XYZ issue? Yeah,
well, that's really important. I definitely want to underline that there's no running from the hard things, because that's what's going to make us all better, is that when we make mistakes, that how do you correct those things? Not everything is going to be utopia. That's not possible. It's unrealistic. Perfection is unrealistic. So how do you push in innovation or push in creating some new things? And if you make a mistake, how do you learn from that quickly? Mm-hmm. I love the idea of failing fast. It's like, fail fast and then correct it. Don't let it draw out and then it's like, okay, now we're failing for years.
And we're still here.
No, we don't want to do that. You got to fail fast and learn from it, get back up. So for me, it is about using each part of the process to tell the larger story. And also, I'm also just inspired by the possibilities of hearing, the experiences that are maybe not right on the nose. I've worked with quite a few people over the course of my career, and at Uber, I started a series in which we are telling the stories of different pop culture folks who are in the vehicle and able to talk about anything.
Like who?
Well, we just did one with LeBron James.
That's right.
Carrie Champion, who is a awesome personality on ESPN, was the driver. She's a great storyteller also, and so she interviewed LeBron James and Kevin Durant right before the All-Star game. And that piece really made me proud, because of course it's like we could hear LeBron and KD talk about basketball all day long, that's fine. But what they went into was the complexity of being a black man in America, and what racial injustice looks like, even when you're a wealthy black man. LeBron went into the story about having a home in Brentwood and still having the N-word spray painted on his gate. And what does that mean? How does he talk to his sons about that, about growing up being a black man in America? He had some points about the current administration.
He did.
And there was some reaction to it, which actually just, it underlined the point, because the reaction was, well, maybe he's just shut up and dribble. Like, really? Like, we can't, athletes can't have opinions? All of us can have an opinion about many, many things that are happening in our culture, but I'm proud to, have a space in which we can create catalyst moments to have real discussion about important matters in our culture. And if those types of conversations can happen within an Uber, then great. It can happen between two people.
Yeah.
Because when else are you, close to someone that maybe is not in your friend circle? It's like we all think that we have diverse groups of friends, but probably not. And so can we encourage more conversations that will lead to a better society in these environments? I hope so. Oh, well, thanks.
There's some questions we're getting in on Slido, and I wanted to kind of pop in and out of those to make sure everyone has a chance to ask a question of you. And one of the questions is, work and creativity rarely happen at one desk in a chair at the office. We're all moving around. We're all like this. And the question is, where does creativity happen for you and your team? And my personal follow-up is, in the age of this, where literally I'm in my Uber or Lyft and I don't even look up, how do you surprise people and bring them into a story? What's the hook?
Yeah. Well, yeah, inspiration comes from so many places. Inspiration comes from my 8-year-old daughter, who, has a very active imagination. And sometimes it's like, whatever she's interested in, I have to go follow up and see what that thing is, But I'm also very open in the office about bringing your whole self. That's not just a saying, it's not just a way to be. It should be a way to be, but it's also very beneficial because people are coming with all of their experiences, whatever they've done during that day or whoever they've encountered, their past, there's so much that in storytelling can be found in our own personal experiences. So I really encourage everyone who works with me, who is on my team, to come to the table as their full selves. It's like, for me, there's no better time right now than to explore these ideas around diversity and to make sure that we are hearing different points of view. For far too long, we've had one point of view, and it's time for us to hear others.
And being inclusive at the office and being able to project that in the brand at Uber is no doubt hard to do in itself. And it's also hard to do when Uber has had some reputational issues. But beyond what we know, what has happened at Uber in the last year and a half, there's also some really exciting innovations going on that sometimes scare a lot of people. Maybe not a lot of people in this room are scared of autonomous driving, serious innovation when it comes to innovating jobs away in the eyes of so many Americans. So my question to you is, when you are at a company that is innovating quickly and succeeding but also failing fast and trying to succeed again, how do you convey to people who worry what Uber might be doing to not just the taxi industry, but to people who drive for a living in the future? Maybe it's not tomorrow, but maybe they're thinking 10 years down the road, 5 years.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think that all of the companies that are innovating, who are creating new opportunities for people, should be concerned holistically about what is happening to the entire, the totality of the workforce, right? It's often the question that I grapple with a lot, when I think about, 50 years ago, there was a milkman who delivered milk, right, to the doorstep. What happened to that job?
Gone.
What happened to that milkman? Is he the Amazon driver now? Or what is he doing now? And I think that there is a really important moment for us to consider what are the new opportunities that can be created when something else replaces it or something else comes along. Because for me, human evolution and the idea of innovation is inevitable. we're not going to stop time. We're not going to be able to stop these innovations from happening because we, quite frankly, demand it, right? Innovation is demanded by us. And so as we move forward in those spaces, there is some responsibility for those who are creating the innovation to have a seat to talk about, well, what happens to those jobs or opportunities that no longer exist. And it is very important.
Do you think that Uber's communicating that well?
Not yet. I think that there is a lot of work to be done because it's not today.
It's not happening just yet.
Yeah. But there is an opportunity to communicate what does that mean, for our larger business and our larger industry. And I don't know that it belongs to one company either. I do believe in, an industry coming together to help explain what is happening as a result of its innovation. That these are the moments where companies can actually come together, that perhaps it's not up to one, but up to all.
What other companies are you guys coming together with to institute some real change and also calm the fears of, whoa, am I gonna have a job?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of competition at the moment, so perhaps not a lot of hand-holding, but it is important to come together. I mean, I'm gonna pivot a little bit from that question because there's probably a more important one that I wanna point out, which is it's just like over Black History Month, Uber, Google, quite a few companies in Silicon Valley came together to promote Black excellence. In that we know that the numbers for African Americans in Silicon Valley is dismal.
Single-digit percentages.
It's dismal.
Even at Uber.
It's ridiculous. All of it. I mean, quite frankly.
What, 9%
for
right
me,
now?
Well, here's the thing is that for me, I want to make sure that we are opening the door. That everyone can come together to make sure that we are moving the conversation forward. So again, it's not up to one company, it's up to the entire industry to make sure that we are moving the conversation forward. So sometimes those walls of competition need to come down, in order to move the entire industry forward.
There's been an argument on that same note that there's a pipeline problem.
That's bullshit.
I have heard that same response from so many
That's
CEOs,
so
and yet the argument still persists. So what can be done to, first of all, make that go away and really institute some serious material change and see diversity numbers from all across the spectrum go up?
Well, we're seeing it right now, in that we are demanding change.
Yeah.
We're demanding it. And again, this is not the issue of people of color to make the noise. Everybody else needs to make the noise. I want white men to make the noise. I want white men to look around in their office and say, oh, look, there's a lot of white men here. Let's change this.
Our whole board looks the same.
I'm like, when I'm asked the question, literally, you can see it right now, it makes me so angry. I'm like, why do I, as the Black woman, have to come and fix that? That makes no sense. I'm like, there's 50 of you. There's one of me. You know what I'm saying? Like, y'all fix it.
Facts.
And it's not a pipeline issue. It's not a pipeline issue. It's the same as like any other, societal ill that we have. It's like we stick to what was familiar. We stick to what makes us feel comfortable. And so if you're not comfortable with people who don't look like you, talk like you, not from where you're from, and all those things, who wear their hair in an afro, then perhaps you're not going to welcome them into your environment. So it's not a pipeline issue, it's a comfortability issue.
Do you think Uber is doing enough? Does the plan work to fix this problem inside your company?
Yes.
What's sorry.
Yes, because part of it is the demand, right? That we as a society have to demand these things. And that's part of the reason why I went to Uber. Because if Uber is the poster child for all the things that are wrong, and that can change, then no one else has an excuse.
It's a strong statement.
It's true. And so if Uber's under the microscope to make those changes, then those changes must be made. And then again, we can turn around and be like, oh, okay, so what y'all doing now?
Yeah.
And that's the demand.
So
that's the pressure.
from within. It comes,
yes. And then you've got to look outside. So sure. I don't think there should be any fear about that kind of pressure.
We have a lot of founders, investors, people who are dreaming of founding a company out here. When you look at what Uber has been doing to fix and diversify and be more inclusive, what is one thing that you've practiced inside Uber that you think everyone in this room should also practice at their tiny startup or at their massive corporation?
Yeah. Well, one of the changes we just made was around the cultural norms, for how to be, what the internal culture is. And I think it's really important, especially for founders and folks who are growing companies, that, not to just concentrate on the product growth, that the product pipeline, the product plan is as important as the cultural plan. What do the people look like? What is the environment like? Who's in the office? Who's developing the technology? Do they reflect the audience that you're trying to encounter? And if they don't, put a plan against that too. That both of those things must happen at the same time.
So it's being mindful in who you hire?
Yes.
And having a system to accomplish that?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's some really good questions staring me down right now, and I'm having a really hard time not asking them, so I'm going to pick one right here. Aaron asks, let's talk about the nitty-gritty. Can you take us through the steps of a solution to a major problem you faced at Uber?
Through the steps of what?
Of how you tackled a major problem at Uber, a solution. Aaron's interested in hearing about the specifics of how you tackle a challenge and what that challenge was.
Okay. Well, one of them is in communication, right? Of the ideas, the advancements that are happening within the company. Because sometimes I feel that the explanation is as good as or is more important than the result. It's like, I take it back to like 4th grade math, when, you're doing your
how you
math.
got there
how did
wrong.
you get to the answer? You know what I mean? It's like you couldn't just like write your answer down. You need to show your math, right? You need to show the work. It's the same idea, which is that how are we getting to that solution? And can we tell the story the whole way? And that's a very different way to approach the storytelling of innovation, right? Most people want to hide all of the inner workings until you're at perfection. And then put that out.
Transparency is not exactly the strength of the Valley.
Well, but it should be. I think all of us, again, I'm using us, the royal we, as the example that we want that. We want transparency. We don't want transparency just in the product and how it's made, but we want transparency in the leadership. We want transparency in so many things along the continuum. And so to me, I think that's one of the solutions in one of the big problems at Uber right now in communicating why something is being done, so that there's real understanding of the process to get there and the reasons why something is created and not just to create.
That leads really well into a question from Kat, who's asking, what is Uber doing to win me back? Assuming Kat is clearly not using Uber right now.
Right. Okay, well, Kat, listen. Let me and you talk, okay?
No pressure, Kat.
Exactly. Kat, I don't know where you at, girl. Or guy. But here's my real hope is that it's the little advancements that are gonna win Kat back.
Like what?
Like the changes in how we are interacting and dealing with drivers, right? We did a program called 180 Days of Change about 6 months ago, which was around this idea, like we've done a lot of thinking and hearing of what drivers wanted. And there were, advancements that, quite frankly, excuse me, some others had made, but that we needed to add to our own platform, right? And so those things were done to help drivers feel more confident in not only what they were participating in, but also what they were taking home, et cetera. But also, like I said before, in the storytelling of what is happening inside of the vehicle, but also what are we doing as the innovators in the space? Like, why are we creating some of the things we're creating? And that hopefully all of that information will win Kat back, and that she'll feel more confident. I'm just gonna go with she. She'll feel more confident that the company's objectives and intentions are in the right place. And that if there are mistakes that are made, that she will feel confident that there are people who are inside of the company whose intention it is to get it right.
So that human story is what you hope will win Kat back.
Yeah.
All right, Kat, there's your answer.
Get at me, Kat.
What brand is crushing it right now that is not Uber that you really admire that you'd like to share with us? Who do you look at when you're scrolling through Insta or you're on the interwebs? Like who? Yeah.
I really like Warby Parker a lot.
Warby Parker?
Yeah.
The eyeglass company?
Yeah. Because
Why?
I think because I understand their intention, or at least what they tell me.
You feel like it's clear?
Yeah, I feel like it's clear. I feel like they intend good in the world.
How did you get that message from them?
Through a lot of their, all of the messages that they, tell, like in their, definitely in their comms. I like the founders. I follow them on social media. I feel like they're doing good, and I like that. It makes me feel good about what they do. And I don't wear glasses, but if I did, I'd be wearing them.
That's awesome. That's a brand that's really broken through to you then. You don't even use the product.
But that's the whole beauty of brand marketing, which is that, like, even if I don't use the product, if I did, would I choose them? And that's when you win.
We have another question here from Kyle. Kyle, sorry, there's a reflection. What do you want to say about the current culture at Uber to those that may be skeptical about the changes happening there?
Well, I think it's kind of like Kat's question. So Kat and Kyle, this is for both of you. No, it is about transparency, right? You can't be, everyone's going to be skeptical if I don't know what's happening. And so it is about transparency at the end of the day. It's like, how do we communicate what we're doing in a way that's going to make people understand the reasons why decisions are made? And that's the best that you can do. There's no other way to do that.
Do you think are you getting the support and cooperation to achieve that goal from the new CEO, Dara, and the newly installed executive team that you are?
Yeah.
What is that conversation like in the C-suite or the C?
Yeah. Well, it is very inclusive, in that the hard conversations are happening. Even when it is difficult to make the decision, to share information, it is done because we believe in transparency. We believe in doing the right thing, and so for me, it's, again, I think to Kyle's question, being skeptical is about the lack of trust, right? If you don't fundamentally, if you don't know the person or the reasons why someone is doing something, that's when you're skeptical. If you feel like, okay, I have an idea about their overall intention, then you're more willing to give them a chance, right? And I think at the end of the day, that's what we want to do every day, is communicate enough that people will give us a chance.
How much of a priority is it within the company, and this is going back to Kat's question a little bit, to win back those that Uber has lost? Is that, or is it more about just winning new customers because so many Americans and people around the world are still new to ride sharing? So what's the bigger priority, winning back those you've lost or gaining new customer share?
I don't know that there's a choice. I think it's everything, because it's really, it's not great for a brand to have people out who are detracting from it, right? And so those that have been sort of lost in the conversation do need to be convinced, or at least given the alternative view, that there is some positivity happening. that lessons have been learned and that there are changes being made. Again, I have to compare it to being human, because again, it's like, the brand is not without heart. It's people who are making the decisions. And so if those people can learn lessons and then correct those things, then shouldn't we give those people another chance?
You've done a lot of interviews. You're very kindly speaking with me and with all of us today, and we really appreciate it. What's one question that you've not been asked that we should be asking you that you've wanted to share?
Oh, Lord. Listen, I'm captain of Team TMI, so I don't know. I share so much.
We were talking about sleep patterns backstage because both of us live on airplanes.
Yeah.
And so you've always been really generous with your...
Oh, I'm a great sleeper. Yeah, I sleep well.
Yeah.
I do everything well, but I sleep really well too.
You're a super sleeper. Okay. Another question here we have is, what strategies do you use to unearth the specific human stories that you're talking about at Uber from the employees, the drivers, and the passengers? Can you actually talk to me about the pipeline here? How do you find out about stuff, except for, we know there's angry tweets, and we know that there's angry Facebook posts. What else? How else do you get to these stories?
What's really great? One of the great areas that we have right now are these green light hubs. They're the places where drivers come for information, to sign up. There's like lots of things happening in those places to help support the driver community. And there are, people who are there who are sort of are doing the intake, right, of different stories or things that are happening in the vehicle, from innovation and suggestions to experiences, etc. And so, so there's lots of ways to get it. Listen, I'm driving myself, so I like to get out and understand what's going on the road too.
Are you driving UberX?
I drive Pool.
Okay, that must be so fun.
Yeah, I do.
How has that been?
Yo, let me tell you something. Listen, I don't think there's a better way to understand, like the adage is true. It's like walk a mile in my shoes, right? Or drive a mile in my car. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like before you understand what somebody is going through. And I did a lot of listening. I ran around the country. I've been running around the country talking to lots of people about the experience of driving for Uber, but there's nothing quite like sitting in the seat yourself, and having all of the pressures, it's like that's mostly what I thought about, or what I think about is like, I want to make sure the temperature is great and I'm offering water and, like I'm not missing any turns on the navigation.
Oh, yeah.
And, it's like, does somebody want to talk to me or they did not want to talk to me?
Yeah, that's my main concern.
Yeah.
Would I talk too much?
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. It's like, it's a lot of therapy going on.
Do you find that when you're driving an Uber Pool and that social environment, more people are willing to talk to each other, or most people? My experience is nobody wants to talk.
Yeah, exactly.
In a pool.
And then because I tend towards humor, I wanna try out my material, on people.
This is a testing ground.
Yes, in case I decide to do stand up next. You know what I'm saying? That like I'm testing out my material. It goes over
it
doesn't go over like this. I don't get any chuckles. It doesn't work at all.
It's your silence?
Most of the time, yes. It's very bad.
Do you ever tell them, by the way, I'm the chief brand officer at the company you're riding in?
No, I don't say it, but it's kind of hard to miss this hair. So, you know what I mean? It's like most of the time, yeah. But most of the time I get the questions like, really? So tell me, how long have you been driving? I'm like, a long time.
A long time?
Yeah.
When was that first Uber drive for you?
Oh man, it was like 5 months ago, probably 6 months ago. Yeah, it was really scary. My first passenger I was picking up from a grocery store in San Francisco, and he, had a whole bunch of, groceries, and I was so terrified, to pick him up. Because listen, here's the thing: is that I like I said, I'm boasting, but I think I'm a great driver. Okay.
Low expectations.
I'm telling you, I grew up in Colorado Springs, Colorado, where, all right, hey, Colorado Springs, all right. Okay, I see you. Oh, okay, we got one. All right. And in Colorado, it's like wide open spaces. I learned, like I got my learner's permit at like 15 and a quarter. I've been driving a long time. I lived in New York City for 15 years and I drove, my car there. So I felt like I can handle terrain, or city drive. I can handle anything.
It all.
And I've got an 8-year-old, like I said, she's like the hardest passenger on the planet, I feel like I can handle anything. But again, it's like, I think the environment of like the pressure of making sure that you are doing, the right thing, you got the right turns and all the tactics that are happening in the car and the energy of people, that you've got to make sure you're doing right by people is a lot of pressure. And so that first ride was really tough for me, and I had to confess.
It's a lot of pressure from all angles. I don't know that I could do it.
Yeah. No, but it's really interesting. I mean, you learn a lot. I've certainly learned more.
But that's where you go. You go there for the stories. You go to the people who work in the green light hubs as well to find compelling stories. You probably see all the stuff on social media.
Yes. Yeah.
There was a great question that was just here at the top. From Kyla. With your work in lots of mainstream of the moment brands, Apple, Beats, Uber, obviously, what's the one piece of advice that you'd give to an older brand, a grandfather brand, struggling to remain relevant in this day and age? Yeah,
that's a hard one because, like I said, there is no plan, right? That you have to be open to what is happening in the world and the conversations, et cetera. And so it's really important for brands who are established to remain constant. That being so wedded to a grand idea of who you are really stops you from evolving. Again, it's like I would just compare it to being human. It's like we can't just sit and be static. That all the experiences in our lives change us, they shape us, they make us better. And so brands need to do that as well. And I have to say it again because this is like my line, hire diverse people. It's like the world is changing so much. It's like, shouldn't we hear all of the voices and influences of
And how does that
people?
impact the bottom line?
Oh, tremendously. I mean, listen, there's so many studies that have been done about, the impact of what happens with business when you have not just a diverse leadership team, but also a diverse workforce, that we don't even need to go into because it's actually proven. So at this point, if you're not doing that, then you're actually just hurting your business and you're totally irresponsible.
We have a great question from Tiffany. Your confidence and passion in being a phenomenal Black woman inspire me every day. What advice do you have for a young Black woman who wants to embody this?
Yes, Tiffany girl. Okay. It's actually really a tough question because, again, my hope for Tiffany is that she's not the one burdened with having to find the environments that work for her. That the environments are the ones who are feeling the pressure to make it great for Tiffany. And so, but right now, the best that I can say is that if you show up as yourself, this is like the best way to test it, right? It's like, if you show up as yourself, like wholly as yourself, and the environment is not conducive, or someone's saying something crazy to you, then you gotta go. Like that's not the environment that's gonna be great for hearing your contributions as a Black woman.
What if that environment is somewhere where you wanna thrive and lead, and that environment is where you thought you belonged?
Yep. Then you gotta find some allies, because none of us can do this by ourselves, right? And so sort of my joke and my challenge about, white men is that, we've got to also find the allies, make people our allies to ensure that the environments are going to be conducive to us. And so how can Tiffany and other people like Tiffany make sure that we find our allies to embolden us? There are things that are happening in the hallways, conversations that are happening in rooms that we're not in, which need to support us. And so how do we find the people who are going to do that? And by the way, again, I don't want this to be Tiffany's issue. You know, it's like all of us in this room, it's like if you're sitting here and you work in an environment where there is one Tiffany, can you help Tiffany, please? You know, can you do that? Yeah, let's not wait for Tiffany to ask the question. It's like, can you do that? Do that as soon as you get back to your office.
An actionable item right there.
Yeah.
A few more questions. I'm checking the time. Oh, we only have 5 minutes left. Okay. So on that note, on internal culture, that's what you're talking about here. Compare for me what it was like internally, culture-wise, when you got to Uber last year, just days before Travis, the CEO, left, versus now. When you walk into HQ, when you walk into those regional offices, what is the main difference?
Yeah. It's a
culturally.
Culturally, I think it's a much more hopeful environment, right? In that those days when I first arrived at Uber were really difficult because people were unsure of what was going to happen, right? That there was a feeling of powerlessness in being able to react to anything that was happening externally or internally. And now there's a real sense of hopefulness, you know, that people do feel empowered to create the story that they want in the world, you know, to have the hard work that they are putting forth celebrated. And so that to me is probably the biggest change. And I am hopeful for the future.
Excellent. One last question for you from me. What does Uber look like it's 2018, in 2028? What do you want Uber to look like? Not what do you think it's going to look like. What is the gold standard for where this company is in 10 years?
Wow. Well,
paint me your most ambitious picture.
Well, I think there's lots of levels to that. I think culturally, I want it to look like the utopia that we're talking about, you know, in terms of who's in the company. You know, that not just at Uber, but in Silicon Valley, in Hollywood, in lots of places that we are seeing a real change in terms of who's sitting in the leadership seats. You know, that there's more diversity at those tables, that women are more empowered, that the ideas that we're able to bring forth are fueled by the experiences that are happening in our world and not just by a chosen few. And I hope that has also then, you know, changed the way that our cities react to Uber as a contributor to the positivity that's going to happen in our culture versus a detractor.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Boz, for being here. On behalf of the audience, thank you for your candor.
Thank you so much.
And your stories. I really appreciate it. So amazing to meet you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Amazing.